So in this video we are going to be adding in the pockets to the side seams. So we have our back top here, tier here, and that's the other back, and then we have our front. If you're making the pleated A-line version, it's going to be the exact same process. You're just going to have a much bigger skirt here, piece here that you're working from. So I have the side seams here stabilized with a fusible bias tape. Because we'll be working quite a bit with this area here, it's just going to give it that wee bit more stability. If you don't have this, you can just use thin strips of interfacing as well. So we're going to be, most inseam pockets, you'll sew one pocket on the front, one on the back, and then sew them all together with the side seam. The way we're doing this one here in this pattern, it gives you the opportunity to do your side seams then with a French seam, and it's also just, it's a slightly nicer finish. It's a new technique for you to learn as well. There will also be a tutorial for how to put in a regular inseam pocket. We'll be adding that for the Emily dress, as I know some people have been looking for a pocket, so there will be an extra pocket piece to download if you want to do it that way instead. So, and a tutorial to go with it. So we're going to start with a pocket right side up and stitch it down. So your notches are very, very important here. We will be sewing it in between the notches and making sure we start and stop at either side. So this has been sewn just with a 1 centimeter seam allowance, and you can see there we've started and stopped within these notches here. So then we're going to flip this over and understitch again just in between the notches. So if you mark here, you can either mark this with a chalk or with a pin. So I've stopped my stitching there. I'm just going to pop a pin in here, and that will remind me where to start and stop. Go. There we are. So that is this side then understitched in between the two notches, so you can see this part of the pocket here is free, and we've got our lines of stitching here. So I'm going to repeat this on the other side now as well. So we have both sides now sewn on here. So at this stage you can make the decision, you maybe already have, because the bodice is fully lined, it can be a nice option to then French seam the rest of the visible seams, which is doable with this pattern, especially with the pockets like this. So if you're going to be French seaming, you're going to sew together first your pockets wrong sides together and sew this with a 5mm seam allowance, and then you're going to trim that down, flip it around and sew it with the pockets right sides together. For this one here, I'm just going to be overlocking the seams. So we will go on ahead and sew these pocket pieces now together, just the normal right sides together. And then you can see where it's so important to stitch just between the notches in this next step. So we have our pocket bags sewn onto this. For this one, this is the top tier, or if you're making the A-line skirt, this will be attached to the top of each side of the A-line. So I have my little scissors here, Lisa Taylor ones from last month's boxes, or Lamazi Makers kits. So we are going to be snipping into the stitching line here. So where your notches are, and just before the understitching stops, so you can see now. So here we've just done a stitch in as close as you can to a snip in as close as you can to the stitching line, and we'll do it at the top as well. And this is where the notches are, and then you will be able to flip your pocket piece to the inside, so your seams all come out. Here, I'll pop a wee pin in, and then the same up here, so you can see our seams were tucked in, and I'm just pulling them out here where they've been snipped. And we'll give this a press, but you can see now we have our pocket here. So our pocket now has become part of the whole front piece. And then if you were to sew a French seam, you would be sewing this wrong sides together first with your smaller seam allowance, flipping it over, and your second row of stitching would be just before this pocket opening, so that you have a really, really nice finish then on the inside. And having it just attached to the front here gives it, I think sometimes when you're sewing a pocket to the front and the back, they can get a wee bit skew if they're not quite lined up, and you can end up with your openings in different places and things like that. So this sort of keeps it all to the one pattern piece, and then you have a much cleaner finish at the end. So we'll do the same on this side, and then I'm just going to, the next step for this one is going to be sewing the sides together and then attaching the bottom of the skirt. So again, where we've snipped it, we're just pulling that around so that it's sitting wrong sides together. Bringing this over. So we're going to sew the side seams on. For the gathered skirt, we'll be sewing it at the top here through all 3 layers, so the outer and the 2 pocket pieces. For the bottom, we're just going to be sewing it onto, so keeping this part of the pocket out of the way just until we get the gathered skirt attached, because we don't want to have this pocket piece sort of getting in the way whenever we're sewing this next tier on. So you just want to make sure, you can see here, we haven't quite caught all of the raw edge, so you want to make sure you've caught enough of that within your seam allowance so that it doesn't fray. We'll just sew that in a wee bit closer here. The next stage will be to attach this top tier of the skirt to the bodice so that we can put in the invisible zip, and then we're going to be sewing on the bottom tier of the skirt. So you can finish this bit now. this seam that you've just sewn with your overlocker, or if you've done it with a French seam, with your French seam. And then we'll be ready to attach the bottom tier.